Josh.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Satellites. You've done a whole piano album.
I have.
Why don't you talk us through the concept?
So the idea was, let me take you back to the start.
Please do.
Over the past few years I've had lots of different projects, and some of them have been released, some of them have not been released. They've all just been manifestations of the different musical ideas I've had and I've been interested in. And I thought it'd be nice to summarise so far what I've done. So I picked one track off each album, some places two, and rearranged them for piano. And I thought it'd be nice to give them all an equal footing, so they're all, not one is more important than another. Just because one came from a side project and one came from a released album, they're all equally important. And I've also wanted to do a piano album for a long time, because my main instrument is piano. I spend most of my time playing piano live, so I thought it was about time I had one. And Fee's dad also said, "Why haven't you done a piano album?" So I thought
So you had to.
I should hurry up, and that's where it came from. A nice, a satisfying collision of ideas, really.
And you said just then that these tracks are taken from all kinds of areas of your back catalogue, your work. Some, listening to it, jumped out as very well-known ones. Some I think people won't have heard before.
No, that's what's quite exciting, really, is I get to show people where everything fits in a broader scheme of things.
So I'm just interested in Satellites, the idea of calling it Satellites. Where has that come from?
I was trying to find a metaphor to describe the idea of all these different worlds that I had spinning around. Because for me, they're all equal projects. Some of them have been released and had PR done on them and released nationally and been reviewed. Some of them have made it no further than just friends or myself. But for me, they're all the same. They're just me exploring with music. So I like the idea that they were all worlds sort of spinning around. And one of the tracks, to go back to Miracle Trees, then I was a satellite artist to a guy called John Newling. So I pinched that idea of one artist being like a satellite orbiting another.
Okay.
And I thought these tracks were a bit like that. So they're like different worlds or different projects orbiting me as an artist. And it just fit really nicely. I also wanted something that was short and simple as an image, and I think it works quite nicely.
Yeah, I agree with that. So can you tell us a bit about the process of recording the album?
Yes, so I was looking for a piano to record, because obviously it had to be a really nice piano. So I thought it'd be good to get a Steinway, because I've always wanted to play a Steinway.
Sure.
And I googled it, and I found a place called Steinway Recording, which
Sounds perfect.
sounded like it. That's what it says on the tin. So I got in touch with a guy who's called Spencer Cousins, and went down to Fulbeck, which is near Lincoln. When I got there, it was just the most amazing space. It's this custom-built area with the beautiful Steinway, perfectly maintained. I've never played a Steinway before, and as soon as I played it, I understood what the hype was all about. It just played perfectly. It's everything I could have wanted from a piano. And he set all the mics up, and then we just got started, worked really hard, and the whole album was recorded in 2 days. Spencer worked really well with me as well. He knew how to get that performance out of me, so he was... Because I'm used to playing the piano for quite a few hours at a time, but not 11 hours running. That's quite a long time. And by the end of it, I was quite tired out, and I thought... And there was one track I was thinking about cutting completely, and he was like, "Nope, we're going to keep going, keep trying it, and we got it all in the end, so we worked really well together."
Fantastic. What track was that was so
Should
difficult?
I say it was Miracle Trees,
Miracle Trees.
which is I think it's quite technical. I am a piano player, but I'm not a classically trained piano player, so I started from that background from the age of 7, and then I gave up around the age of 14, and then left it for a bit, and came back to piano playing just out of my own interests. So I'm semi-self-taught, which means I've got no... I'm not snooty about piano playing, shall we say. And so I'm sure if expert players listened to it, they would say it's easy to play, but I found it quite tricky. It's very fast, lots of notes.
Shall we go through some of the tracks? Let's go through all of the tracks.
Might as well.
So first track on the album, and it is Enchanted Wood.
So that one, I really like that one because it introduces the themes of Into the Green. So there's those 7 tracks at the end of Into the Green, and that's like, I was just playing around with variations on a theme. So I came up with a couple of themes I really liked. There's that that theme, and I just play with that throughout that album. And I wanted to revisit that. I think the piano version hits the nail on the head almost better I think anyway, better than the original version.
I think that there's quite a big difference between the piano version and the original. I think the piano version, you get a lot more sense of space. Maybe it's because of the name Satellites, but the starkness of the piano, I think, really suits the whole project.
There's, like you say, space was a real thing I was trying to capture as well. And when we were recording, we'd keep saying, stop, let's listen back to that. And there were times when I was rushing through it a bit, and it was saying, no, we need to really slow this down and make sure there is the space in between. I think that's what I really like about it, because you can play a musical theme or an idea on the piano, and then when you leave the space afterwards, it gives people time to digest that and to just appreciate the music. You almost strip it down to its bare bones, and you just get an idea of really what the music's about at the core of it. So I think for the first track on the album, Enchanted Wood, I prefer that version. It really works.
So the second track is one that people might not be as familiar with.
It's a new one.
It's completely new.
Yeah, completely new, just written for this project.
Tell us about, is it pronounced
Spera? I'm not sure myself, I think it's Latin. It wasn't named when we went to the studio. I'd just written it. And I still hadn't thought of a name by the time we'd finished, and I knew I had to think of one. And after we'd recorded, it turned out, well, the news came up the next morning, and it said that Notre Dame had caught fire, which is quite a dramatic moment, wasn't it? When we looked back at the timings, then it had set on fire at the very time we were recording. So as the piano was being recorded, Notre Dame unfortunately was on fire. So I thought it'd be really nice to try and capture that or honour that somehow. And I also wanted to ask fans what they thought it should be called. So for a very limited time, I think it was just for a week, I put the 2 new tracks, because there's another one as well, I put them on SoundCloud and put on Facebook and said, have a listen to these, has anyone got any suggestions? And there were loads and loads of names. A lot of the time people couldn't think of names, but they had reflections or feelings based on it. And what kept coming up over and over again was this idea of hope for that track. So I had that in my head, had hope going on, and then I knew there was this Notre Dame connection. Fee suggested that I look for something from the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
A good suggestion.
A very good suggestion, and it fit into place perfectly when I was looking through quotes from it, and Spera was a quote from it, which means breathe hope. So it fit together perfectly.
Perfect.
Had what people suggested about the hope idea, connected to Notre Dame, and it almost, I don't know, it sent a kind of hopeful, aspiration for Notre Dame and that whole episode as well. So how do you feel about this being one of the 2 new tracks? How do you feel it fits in with all of these other tracks that you've come together with? I think it's actually one of the strongest. So I didn't think it would be track 2, but when I listened to them all, because I tried to listen to them all in different configurations to get the right running order, and I kept thinking that this one was a really strong one. It's possibly because it was written just for piano, it's possibly because it's quite fresh, so just, I've written it and then played it, so sometimes I think they come out better that way. So I think it holds up really quite strong in comparison to the others, so that's why I put it as track 2.
Yeah. So track number 3, one that people probably will be more familiar with, Skylark and the Oak. So that's just come out as a single.
Yes.
How do you think that translates to piano?
Again, I think this one works really nicely. The original version also has quite a bit of space in it and is quite stark. But this is just another way of framing that melody. And it's a song that we've been singing for a long time, so to mention Frances again, that was the song that we first started singing together, that brought us together. So I thought I had to have that one on, really. And the project it came from was called Lend an Ear, which was I guess it was my first album that I recorded when we were students. And we went into the chapel at York St John University and booked out the time to do that. And as I started recording, there was this horrible banging sound that started because they were renovating the roof during the exact time I'd booked. It was awful. So I went back to one of my lecturers and said, look, can you do anything about this? And he suggested booking a seminar, a fictional seminar for 11 o'clock at night. So he did that. We went in at 11 o'clock at night, recorded it during that time. and then finished off the vocals in our student house, and we've sung it ever since. So the song itself has got a really interesting story. So I thought that has got to be the track from London that makes it onto the piano album.
And a personal story, so like a very personal bit of the album and your career.
Absolutely, yeah.
Together.
Yeah. So
And then the track after that is also one that people will probably recognise. It's Cold Windy Haley Night.
Called Haley Windy.
Called Haley.
Called Haley.
Oh.
You must get those mixed up. So that is a traditional one. When I was looking at doing the project, I was thinking about trying to make them all originals, but I thought it'd be a bit unjust not to include some of the traditional songs that I've done, just because so much of my career so far has been reworking traditional material. It would be a bit, although that's been a very short space in my career, if you look at all the music I've done, it would be wrong to omit it. So I was looking at the Road to Fair, and I thought, which track does it best? And it's not just about picking the most popular one, it's about picking the one that translates best to piano. So I tried all sorts of configurations, and on the recording it's a really lively, upbeat one and quite riffy. But when I did it for piano, it really drew out the melody. And though it's an English folk song, which English folk songs can be a bit dreary and sometimes a bit ploddy. But the melody of this sounded really Scottish almost.
It's quite a haunting version.
It is. I think I prefer this one as well. It's just really, really nice. I almost didn't recognise it when I first played it and thought, wow, this sounds completely different.
It's difficult to pick it up if you're familiar with your version on Road to Fair. Because I think only after listening to it for a little bit you realise, oh, this is...
That's what it is.
Yeah.
I quite like that about the project. I think a new version of a song is best if it is as different as possible. So if it kind of makes you work to recognise it, then you know you've done something new with it and something valid. Because if it's too similar, then what's the point of doing it?
And the track after that, is this also one of the completely new tracks?
Remind me, I've forgotten what it is.
It is Pauahi.
Pauahi, yes.
Pauahi.
Yes, another brand new one. Definitely written for that modern piano style. So people, I play it sometimes when I'm playing live, and people say, "Oh, it sounds like Ludovico Einaudi," which I'd be privileged if it sounded anything like that kind of thing, but it does give off that kind of modern contemporary sound. Again, it was unnamed. I was trying to think of a name for it, and I think it was around that time they discovered that black hole. They didn't discover it, but they photographed it. Yes, so didn't they get lots of different telescopes all over Earth? I think so. They've had to piece it all together.
I just know that they were very clever.
Yeah, very clever. I think there was some story about them having loads of hard drives, and the quickest way to get all the data together was to host the hard drives. It was quicker to do that than do it online. So that gives you an idea of how big these files were. It was amazing to see that image. I think this is the first ever image of a black hole, and there's something just really hauntingly beautiful about something so deadly and dangerous and destructive. So I thought it deserved its own song, and we joked, a tune, not a song, some lyrics on there, but we joked in the studio that by the time this album's out there'll be 100 other tracks called Pauahi as well, because everyone will have jumped on the same bandwagon, so we'll see.
Well, I did look it up on Spotify, because I was like, I don't recognise this one at all, so I wonder if I just missed it from your back catalogue. And I didn't see any Pauahis.
Well, that's a good sign.
So, well done for getting in there.
Yeah, well, I did find one on Apple Music, so maybe.
One solitary one.
They've beaten me to it. Right.
I think that this is actually my favourite track. The whole album, yeah. I think it's very... it's very good. Very good.
It's quite spacey as well.
It is. It fits the concept very well. It's quite a change then to the next track, which is Dance of the Pixies.
Oh yes. I remember after we finished recording it, Spencer clicked stop and then said, "What's this one called?" I said, "Dance of the Pixies." And he said, "I've never recorded a track called Dance of the Pixies or anything like it before." So it is unique. So that comes from Tales of Rissendom, which you will remember from our student days when I decided it was a good idea to construct an enormous fantasy landscape out of papier-mâché.
3 boards were.
3 boards, and I had to import quite a lot of plastic trees from China for that project. It took up a lot of room. We had his own bedroom, didn't he, in the house? Ridiculous. So I did that massive fantasy board game. I was really into making board games instead of music at that time, and I thought the best next step after making this universe was to write the soundtrack. So the idea was that we have a soundtrack as we play the game, but musically the point of it was to have like a musical sketch pad, so something that's all about the process as opposed to the finished product, and whatever musical ideas came into my head I would explore them. If I heard something in some other music that I liked, I could have practice at doing that kind of thing.
So a little bit like a sandbox, musical
Absolutely,
sandbox.
yeah, that's it. And it was just sprawling in every direction, playing around with all these sounds. There's huge keyboard solos and orchestral passages. And one of them was Dance of the Pixies, which I think is my favourite of it. And it's this semi-orchestral synthesizer idea, and it's a bit of a pastiche on late classical music. But there's a couple of different melodies sections within that piece, and the one I've arranged for piano is my favourite little segment from that. I was thinking about changing the name of it, and I thought, you know what,
keep it real.
Keep it real. It's what it was. I'm trying to show the evolution of all the projects, so it'd be wrong to change the name of it.
So after Dance of the Pixies, you've got the second track from this album, From Into the Green, which is Smuggler's Tale.
Yes, I did cheat a little bit, and that is because the first half is different from the second half. The first half are a set of independent songs and quite a lot older than some of the others.
And then the second half of Into the Green is the whole Into the Green suite.
Absolutely, yeah. So The Smuggler's Tale was written when I lived in Kendal with my grandparents. Okay. I was doing my A-levels at the time, and I went to a folk session, and it was one of my first experiences seeing folk music played live. And I really fell in love with it. I just loved the storytelling, some of the ballads that they did, and so I had a stab at writing my own folk song, and it ended up as a swashbuckling Pirates of the Caribbean pastiche, really. And I think that comes across more in the piano version. It sounds a lot like Pirates of the Caribbean, those kind of rhythms going on. But yeah, it's a great story. People still really like that one, and I think it's quite nice.
It's one of the ones that you play live.
We used to. We recently cut it out of the set, actually, just because I heard we played it so many times, but maybe it needs to come back again.
Maybe the piano version could come back.
Yes, good idea.
And that is followed up by one that I think people will recognise, though I know it quite well, Earl King.
Yes, from Valinor.
Yes.
So Valinor's where it all started, really. It was a project that I started off with Ben, my older brother. So they are the first songs I wrote for Valinor. So I must have been, 14 when I started writing songs for Valinor. And it's this big sprawling fantasy, prog rock, very classical infused, operatic type thing. It's very grand. And one of the songs off there is called Earl King, and that was added quite a bit later, again from the same time as Smuggler's Tale. It was because we were studying Gothic literature when I did English literature. And this was a poem that my English teacher gave to us. I really liked it. It's this story of this father, and he's riding home on his horse with his son, and as they're riding along through the Black Forest, then the Earl King, who's the king of the elves, he appears and he's sort of drifting along beside them, but the father can't see him, only the child can, and he's trying to tempt the boy to come and live in the fairy world, and the boy's obviously scared by this and saying to the father, I can see the Earl King. But every time the father looks, he just sees the wind rustling the leaves, or there's lots of excuses that he comes up with, or there's lots of ways the Earl King manages to hide himself.
Lots of explanations.
And in the end, the boy says, the Earl King's got me, he's got hold of me, and then suddenly the father realises it's serious, because the boy, I think he basically falls unconscious, and he rides home as fast as he can, and by the time they get home, the boy's dead. So the father's like, I should have listened to him. And I think it's a really traditional folk story from Germany, or that part of Europe. Obviously really quite chilling and scary. Schubert actually did his own arrangement of this, and I didn't know this at the time because I was an ignorant student, I guess. It's dun 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 dun. It's very very dramatic. So this one is very chilled out, very flowing. I tried to capture the the fairy tale.
A bit creepier.
Yes, it's definitely a bit. It's less sort of operatic and less dramatic, and it's a bit more atmospheric. And the original on Valinor was played on this really lovely Bechstein piano, this really crooked, slightly honky-tonk baby grand piano, and it had vocals as well, and that was it. So I thought it'd be really nice to just remind people of it, really. So I've done it again just for piano. So yeah, go and check out Valinor and have a listen to that.
And Schubert.
And Schubert, of course.
Schubert. What are you like? Schubert. So the track that follows that is High Germany, which is one which fans of yours will be, again, a little bit more familiar with. This is from the Seasons project?
It is, yes. So that project where I decided to arrange, record and release a folk song every week for a year. So obviously there were 52 tracks and I had to choose one for this project, and it was quite tricky. So I thought it had to be from songs from the Seasons, because that was the best of from the whole Seasons project. And I didn't think it would be High Germany, because again, like Cold Hilly Windy Night, that's quite a ploddy, straight English folk song. But I tried to do something completely different with it. So there's this repeating motif that I do with the left hand all the way through. Just about managed to get away without getting RSI in my left hand in the end. And then over the top of that, then the melody plays. So the melody doesn't quite match up with that rhythm, and you get this interesting syncopation that goes on as it drifts and links as it goes through the piece, which is just a new way of framing that melody.
Which again works really well with the concept of satellites in space.
Yeah, that kind of orbiting idea going around, yeah. And the thing I like about High Germany as well, as the track I picked, is that I was really taken with Martin Carthy's first album, so it was really inspirational for the Seasons project, and that's been a track that we've played live all the time throughout the whole of the tour this year. So it feels right that that's the track that gets represented for this project as well.
Yeah,
so yeah, pleased I chose that one.
It's one of the better tracks on the whole album, I think. I think it works really well. And it's followed by one which I feel is close to both of our hearts, Condor Keep.
Absolutely, which has not yet been released.
Well, it has at this point now.
Now it has, yeah.
The piano version.
Indeed. In fact, it was a friend who'd heard it because I shared demos with them. She said, when is Condor Keep going to appear in an album? And I keep saying to her, and have done for years, it'll be in the next one, it'll be in the next one. And it never has been, and I don't think it's going to be in the next one because it just doesn't fit, so I feel really bad. But here's the piano version, so it doesn't have the words, but it's got the tune. So this one was based on Everreach, which of course you are the other half of that coin. You could tell us about Everreach.
Well, Everreach was a little project we did together.
It was.
A writing exercise in a way.
Yeah.
And it spawned a lot of spin-offs and a lot of little side projects. Condor Keep being one of them.
Yeah, so the idea was to write a game, like a choose your own adventure, but we just wrote a book.
we fished away the idea of doing a choose your own adventure fairly early on.
We did, and we just wrote this book, and it was great. So within Everreach, there was it's like a prison, isn't it? And when people go into Condor Keep, the rumour is within the world that you can never get out. But like Hotel California, that kind of
idea, that kind of home by the sea.
Yes, yeah, this magical dungeon. And I like the idea of writing a folk song from the world of Everreach. So like Tolkien did the folk songs that the Hobbits sang and the Elves sang and whatever, there would be an equivalent for Everreach. I just imagine them in the pubs and taverns singing about Condor Keep. So it's this. Again, it's a bit of a pastiche. It's a bit more American folk than other things have done.
It's quite bluesy in a way.
And we played it live for years, especially when it was a folk trio and there was just me and Antonio, Matt and Fee. It wasn't a trio.
No,
it was a quartet. It was a quartet with two vocals, guitar, double bass and fiddle. So it was a very different sound that we had at that time. And we played it all the time, gigs, and people got to know it quite well. So it was a song that was sort of a staple in our set. So again, that's why I've chosen it for Satellites. It's not from one of my recorded projects, but it's quite an integral part of the journey so far. And of course for piano, because it's a swing beat on the original. it's got that kind of honky-tonk ragtime feel.
It's a bit more upbeat.
Yes, for me it's the only one that sticks out a little bit on the album, because it's...
But that's good to have one that feels a bit different and change the tempo up a little bit, I think.
Wakes you up.
So this next one you've actually mentioned a couple of times already, Miracle Trees.
Yes, and there is quite a story, which I'll try and shorten as much as I can. Yeah, condense it down. So, when I was a student then, what was her name? Paula Jackson. She was my tutor for primary education. She got us doing this module which was all about creativity, and there was different projects on the tables by a chap called John Newling, who is I think he does art installations, that's the name for it. And we had to pick one and do a creative response. So I looked at them all, and the one that caught my fancy was the Miracle Trees project, and I think the idea was he would germinate a miracle tree from just a seed, because miracle trees are really nutritious, and they've got a ridiculous amount of benefits to the human body. I can't remember what they are exactly, but anything you'd want a plant to do, the miracle tree does it. Yeah. So he germinated these miracle trees, and I think he turned it into a tattoo in the end. That was his project.
On his own body?
He made transfers, and anyone could pick them up from the installation, and then they rubbed away after a day, but it was just it was a nice summary of the project, so I thought, oh, that's quite arty, quite interesting. And so I chose that project, and I thought I would do a piece of piano music for it. And I think you might remember me recording the first take of it, because it was in the chapel at York St John's, and I was going away at this piece over and over again, and eventually I think you just thought, I'm going to have to go home now, because you'd been very patient, and I just couldn't get it. And in the end I did, and I wasn't particularly happy with it, because it was just a bit too challenging for me at that time for my abilities. And I submitted it to the tutor, and she loved it, and she showed it to John Newling, and she did a project with him at her gallery. She also curates the New Schoolhouse Gallery in York. So he came to York, and that was that project I mentioned earlier about having satellite projects, or satellite artists. So on the back of that, the Miracle Trees, then I was invited to be a satellite artist for John Newling, and that was a whole separate thing. We did 21st Century Eden. That was really interesting as well. I'm on a tangent here, but the idea was he made these little statues which were plaster people, and they're like plasters but painted with gold. And the idea was that the community that we live in today is all about having a quick fix. So we cover everything in plasters, we don't find the cause for anything, we just address the symptoms. And then based on that conversation, he then asked people on the street, literally we were there with clipboards on the street asking members of the public, what do we really want in this life? We're so concerned about covering up all the problems quickly. What do we want? And we collected people's ideas verbatim, like wrote it down, and then at the end, then myself along with I think 7 others, can't remember exactly, we stood in St Helens Square and we read out this list, just literally reading out what people had said, what they want for the world. And when it was my turn, as I read, then this lady she's a lady who's often seen around that area, who I think she sleeps rough on the streets a lot of the time, and she stood there and she shouted, like I had a microphone, and she shouted louder than I was, injustices in the world, and she just listed all these things that were wrong with the world. She wasn't prompted, she just wandered up and did this, so it was this everyone was looking at each other like shivers down your spine at this profound moment as I was reading out this list of things people want in a perfect world, and she was just shouting the truth right back at me, like really close. And you could see people moving to try and get her moved, or she's ruining the art. And John Newland was like, no, leave her, this is what it's about.
Let's see what happens.
This is it. And it was in that moment I realised this is what this kind of art's about. It's not about those little plaster people, although there were these funny little sculptures he made which looked really nice. That's not what it was about. It's about people and connections and people's responses with the art. And that just changed my entire way of approaching music and the way I work as well. So that whole project deserved a mention on Satellites. So although it wasn't that second project, it wasn't the 21st Century Eden music.
What spawned your involvement in it.
It was the Miracle Trees that started it all off, and I thought, right, let's do another version of this and let's get it right. It wasn't particularly easier, so I've not improved that much. I think it's just too fast. It's just a really fast piece of music, but it is a lot better. So yeah,
I'm pleased with it.
I'm pleased with it. Yeah.
So the final 2 tracks. Firstly, one that you have mentioned before, "The Roads Go Ever On."
Yes.
From your Tolkien experiment?
Absolutely. So that was when I was a first-year student. Well, it began earlier than that, really. It was when I was about 9, and in P5 as in Scotland, it was P1, P2, P3 to 7. And I was 4 or 5.
What does the P stand for?
Primary. So instead of year 1, year 2, it's P1, P2. So I was in year 4 or 5, and I didn't like reading particularly. I just didn't have the attention span. And I decided it was a good idea to read The Hobbit. Clearly no teacher stopped me. They're like, just go for that one. I did manage. I was just lazy in the end. I got through it. And I loved it. And I remember finding it really hard to read, so I didn't understand everything. But you know, as a child, when you just get the gist of a book,
yeah,
and you sort of just sucked into that world. And one bit I did get was the songs, because obviously they're quite simple. And I remember in silent reading coming up with the tunes, which is a challenge in silent reading to come up with tunes within my head. And I remember really enjoying that. So when I was a bit older, I thought I would do it properly. So how about I record my idea of those songs, so someone else, when they read The Hobbit, they could listen to the music. So
yeah.
if they're wondering what the songs sound like, they could listen to it. Now, I do stand by the fact that I think everyone should come up with their own songs for that. I think that's what Tolkien meant, that you come up with your own little song for it. But I thought it would be a fun exercise to do my own. And it coincided really well with one of our first assignments on the English module for the primary education course I was doing, which was to put together a resources box for a book. So I found this old, what's it called, poker work, when you burn images into front. This really nice poker work thing for like £1 in a charity shop. And I thought, oh, I've got my box. What would go well with this? The Hobbit would work perfectly with this oldie worldy type thing. So I did all the resources, all the rest of it, and then I thought, what about if I put in the music from The Hobbit? So I was using GarageBand, or GarageBand as it's supposed to be, because I had this orchestra sounds on it. So I put together these little orchestral backings, and it sounds like very much cheap samples of an orchestra, so it's by no means a polished piece of work. And then I went to Middlesbrough, because that's where Nathan was studying at the time, and he was studying sound engineering, so thankfully he had access to a recording studio, which later would be where we recorded Valinor and all the drums on the Road to Unfair, Into the Green, and Songs from the Seasons. So that studio in Middlesbrough has been really good.
Godsend.
It has been, and the first thing we recorded there was the vocals on music from The Hobbit. So it was basically Nathan sitting there patiently while I impersonated orcs and goblins and hobbits and elves in these stupid squeaky voices.
A skill that's stood you well in later years.
It has, yes. Especially as the teacher. So I did these stupid voices, and at the time I thought, yeah, this is great. And the tutor, when I handed in the assignment, she loved it, and hooray, you know. Listening back, I thought it was rubbish because it was silly. You know, the singing wasn't particularly good. You know, I did it in an hour or something, or 2 hours at the end of the day. But when I took it offline, I didn't anticipate how much it had actually been looked at. So I have a modest following online, a very modest following.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it. Use a euphemism for that at the moment online. But compared to what the Hobbit music had, it was nothing. That had actually quite a bit of traction, and it's because it was The Hobbit. You know, that's very well known. And I didn't realise this until people started sending me messages, and people had somehow remembered it was me who'd done it, or somehow, and then got in touch with me through my website and were saying, "Where's music from The Hobbit gone?" So I was thinking, oh gosh, you know, people actually really quite liked this music. So I thought it'd be nice to pick a track off there, and rearrange it, and use it for this. And Roads Go Ever On was a really nice, sweet little melody at the end of that album. So here it is for piano
in all its glory.
Yeah, it would be wrong not to represent it. It might not be something I'm as proud of, but it was a project that happened. So there we go.
There it is.
There it is.
And then the final track on the album, again one that people I don't think will be very familiar with.
Not at all.
Curtain Call.
Again, from that same era, so Londonere, Rissendam, just after The Hobbit, and this one, they were all done in that same student house when we lived together.
In Walpole Street.
In Walpole Street, yeah. Was it 38?
Maybe.
Remember. I think it was 38. Yes, it was 30 degrees. It was 38 Walpole Street, in a little front room where we had Rissendam out on the bed, and then like a little music space. So my little brother, Tim, he called me up because he had joined the drama club at his secondary school, and he wanted to do a musical with the group. So he rang me up and said, can you write the music, please? And he'd written this tragedy, this great play, very Shakespearean, and I remember thinking I've got a lot of work to do because I was a third-year student, but then thinking, but I would like to write a musical. So I said yes, and said, what kind of thing are you thinking? And he said, I'm thinking of a mixture between Les Mis and Rick Wakeman, mixed with a prog rock concept album vibe. So I thought, okay, that's kind of my kind of thing. So I set to work, and it's very varied. Some of it is sounds very typical musical, some of it is very rocky with lots of keyboard solos, but some parts of it I'm really proud of. I think some of it, lyrically and musically, is still some of my favourite work I've done. But the musical never went ahead because, as with a lot of secondary school things, exam season got in the way, and then But I'm really pleased he asked me to do it because the project, the music came out of that. It's never been released, but it's been sitting there on my computer ever since. And the last track on the album is based around the two main characters. So there's been lots of wars and battles and bloodshed. Everyone's dead and sad, typical tragedy. And the two characters are standing there, feeling very sorry for themselves. And I was trying to think of a lyric to capture that, and I came up with "Let's start off where we were before," and the song is built around that idea. And it's kind of a bit Beatles in some ways, with a sort of walking bass line, and then there's a string section at the end, and it's all very nice and pretty. And I just really like that song and thought it'd be nice to represent it in some way on a project. So Curtain Call is the track I picked, since it's called Curtain Call.
Final track.
Had to put it at the end. Had to, really, didn't I?
Yeah, I think so. So we've talked about each track. How do you feel the album is as a whole? How does it come together for you?
I think the tracks work together really well, and I think it works cohesively as a sound for the whole album as well, because previously a lot of my albums have been quite varied in style and instrumentation, and they've tried out lots of different things, which I think is a strength because it makes them interesting as you go through. But it's one of the first albums I've done that's really cohesive all the way through, and I really like it for that reason. I think it's a bit more accessible than other albums I've done as well, because I do enjoy the eccentric prog, psych, folk rock stuff that I've done, but it challenges the listener quite a lot. So you need to be quite into it, and you need to follow all the crazy flourishes.
You need to be engaged.
You need to be very engaged. And you need to understand what that music's about and where it's come from, whereas piano music is very universal. Everyone can enjoy the sound of the piano, and it's a really nice piano as well. And the way I've arranged the pieces, I think you don't need to know what they were. You don't need to know of the other music to engage with this and enjoy it.
So something else that I really like about this project is the design of the album, the artwork. Talk us through that.
So previously for photo shoots we've worked with Ellie Lucas, who is a Sheffield-based photographer, and she's great. And what was really good and refreshing about this project was handing it all over to someone else who did it all. So she took us to a location, she took the photos, she edited them, and then she put it into all the templates, and she did this very clever things where I think she printed them out and then drew all sorts of nice spacey images on them, and it all just looks really sleek and professional. So very, very pleased with that.
Very modern looking, which I think marries up with the tone of the album.
Yes, and she sent through the pictures, and she said she was going to draw things on them. I thought, what's she going to draw on the pictures? And then it was just yesterday that it came through, and she'd really thought about the concept of all the ideas, orbiting. And you'll see she's drawn this amazing graphic over my face, and I hadn't thought. I don't like albums with me on the front. That's why I've avoided it so far. But she's made it work really well.
Well, you've got away with it basically.
Yeah, she's covered up my face. Yes, so it's fine. That's probably why I like it. So yeah, she's done a really good job with that. And the booklet as well. So I looked through that today. She sent through that today, and just all the little details and all the little pictures of balloons. It's just very nice. So there's all the backstories and information about all the songs in there as well. So it's a good read, I hope, as well as a good listen. So
where is Satellites available?
Good question, I'd forgotten that. It is available from my website, which is www.joshuaburnell.co.uk, and for now that's the only place it's available, because as it's a side project, it's not going to be released like the others are.
It's an exclusive.
It is, I guess it's quite exclusive. Yeah.